Hi, everyone. Welcome to a very special episode of the Granite Mountain Movie Club. We're going to be talking about the Fellowship of the Ring, the first installment in Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings trilogy from 2001. This is the 25th anniversary. You might notice that this episode is only about an hour and 20 minutes, and that doesn't sound right for such a big and important movie, and that is because we had some technical difficulties along the way, which kind of ate into our time. But there will be a part 2 coming very soon, probably within the next few days of the time that this comes out. So this one I think I'm going to leave just totally no paywall, but the next installment will probably be fully paywalled. So I hope that works for people. And as you'll notice in this episode, we barely even scratched the movie itself. We're talking about kind of the lead up to the movie and some of the history around it. But my guest is very knowledgeable on the subject. But I'm sure that we missed some stuff, so feel free to point it out. If we see it before I end up recording the next installment, maybe we are able to address some of the things you point out. And with that, enjoy the show.
I read the Lord of the Rings trilogy and the Silmarillion. Not the Hobbit usually. I love it to death, but I just don't. Once a year, sometimes once 2 years. But I've been doing that for the last 10 years. Yeah, so like I love the story in a way. I know there are other people out there. I hate when people are like, oh, I'm the biggest fan. That's so gay to me. Like, you're not. If you have to tell people you're the biggest fan, guess what? Like, you are not. Like, if you got to get a tattoo of something from Lord of the Rings, it's because you don't actually read the lore. You don't know the Akalabeath. You don't read the appendices. You don't actually love it. Like, you love the movies. And yeah, I want to talk about that.
Name 5 lores.
Yeah, name 5 lores. Oh, so, okay, how would we do this? So you say, oh, so you love Lord of the Rings?
Name all
you'd
kings
say what
of
you say is you
Numenor,
name what you would say in that situation is you'd say, name the 5 Silmarils. And there's only one correct answer to that, and that's there are only 3. So you could probably trap someone stupid. But for full disclosure, I have not watched Rings of Power. I will not watch Rings of Power. I've never seen it. Dude, I go to the point where I delete and close and like jump away from the computer if it pops up. Like in this,
I've never seen it. I didn't. Yeah.
I don't know if you want me to talk about this or not. Because again, I'm Thomas Bethlehem for the purposes of this discussion.
I was going to say let's jump into it. Welcome everyone. My guest today is Thomas Bethlehem. We'll call him Tom today. Tom, tell us about yourself.
Oh man, first I want to say I'm so happy to be here. I'm so excited to talk about one of the greatest topics of all time. I am a struggling and just starting out writer. Just released my first book a few months ago, and I am slowly working to put out more books. I care very much about politics and very serious things, but what I am focusing on, what I'm working on is young adult fiction, bringing classical stories forward and just creating, for lack of a better term, right-wing art that deserves to last. Like, that's my focus. That's what I'd like to do. Go ahead.
Tell me about the book. What's it called? Where can people get it and all that?
Oh, yeah. I always save the shilling for the end. So the book is called Fables for Young Wolves. It's a collection of parables and fables that orbit around the concept of the wolf in terms of the beast fable, which is this whole world that I was a party to, but ignorant of before I fell into the writing of the book. And I received inspiration, like literal divine inspiration, but not in some kind of weird religious way. It was just I became aware that I had to write this book, and I did. And it took about 3 years to go from, the first keystroke to publishing. And it was amazing. The entire experience was amazing. And it's actually gotten better now that the book's out. But it was a real challenge for me because I'm very literate and well-read, but I'm not well-read on the classics. I read way too much trash sci-fi and just, the ephemera of the 20th century. But the book was amazing to write, and I've met some incredible people in the process of doing it. And I have 4 more books that I'm working on at various stages of completion, and I'm looking forward to go down that path. So in this iteration of my identity, I'll say, I'm trying to create young adult fiction and children's books that are worthy of all of the families that are in our sphere and beyond.
And what, people can get it on Amazon or where?
Yeah, I'm Amazon only right now. I have a Twitter account and there's links in there, but yeah, it's available on Amazon Marketplace, and I've done really well. And it's hilarious the nuance of the sections on Amazon Books when you start looking at like lists and ratings. And I was the petty king of the young men's and adult male, like, not depression fiction. They had the weirdest title, but I stayed in the top 20 for like 2 or 3 months. And it was awesome because it was like, I tuned my terms. Cause when you write a book with Amazon, and this deserves to be its own kind of podcast, cause it's this crazy rabbit hole. But you can, when you put a book out with the program, which is called KDP, you get like 7 terms that they are going to use in their algorithm, and how you enter those terms and what you do, including the skill with which you wrote the book, as well as all the other things. But it's a critical part of how you, for lack of a better way to say it, game the system on Amazon. And I hate that, by the way. I don't think that's a healthy thing, but we have to play the environment that we're in. And so I just hit it really well with the terms I used, and I got on some lists, and I think that helped like bump up a percent. I have no idea how they do it, and frankly, I don't care. Everybody that's buying the book has done it on word of mouth or word of tweet, and it's been awesome on that front. But I got up on a couple lists there, and some people have been really generous to me in terms of reading the book, reviewing the book, and telling their friends about it. And it's been amazing. It's been such a great experience, and I can't wait to keep doing that with other offerings.
That's awesome. I will put the link to the book and to your like whatever social medias you want to link to. I'll put all that
Awesome.
in the description and stuff. And yeah, like I always say, I mean, these people in our sphere who are writing books and stuff, they don't have institutional backing. No one's going to come along and promote it, or whatever, or like, no NGO is going to buy 50,000 copies to game the New York Times system or whatever. Like we sell what we can sell, and we, real people have to buy it, and that's the only way we can do it. So, so everyone go check out Tom's book.
So just one more note on that, and I'm gonna shill one of my favorite things from the sphere, which is Exit Group, but also specifically the Exit podcast. There's this amazing episode recently with a guy named Devin Erickson, who's a very talented science fiction writer, and everybody who wants to write, who are interested in fiction, and you have to go listen to that episode. But he talks about how precisely what you said. We do not have institutional backing. You have to get in the game, whether it's on social media or however you do your guerrilla marketing. But that's the only way you can go forward. And it's actually good for us. It's annoying. I don't want to do this. I don't want to market. I don't want to shill and share. I just want to write stories. But we have to do these things, and it makes us better. It makes us better writers. It makes us more interesting people. And the more interesting that you are, and the more that you engage, the more people are willing to take a chance on you and your stories. And he just puts it way better than I can. And so I really encourage people, whatever you do, I love Exit, and I think they put out amazing information, and they do so much more than that. But that specific episode is just a gold mine of inspiration and thought. And it's the worst part for me because I don't want to do marketing, but you have to get out there and make connections with people. They will trust you. If you are interesting and creative, they will say, okay, I will take a chance on my time. My most important resource, I'll give it to you. And in all honesty, that's what all writing, that's what all fiction is about, is you're convincing a person to quote unquote waste their time on something that's not real. So
I heard that episode, that Exit podcast.
So good.
And Exit's actually like the sponsor of the show. So that was our Exit ad read. You did it for me, which is a more organic and compelling ad than what
I will expect my Bitcoin in the mail, and I only take specie Bitcoin. So good luck finding a physical Bitcoin.
Let's get into the topic at hand. As the listeners already know, we're talking about Fellowship of the Ring, the first of the 3 films in Peter Jackson's trilogy adaptation from 2001. So that's we are in the 25th anniversary of the Fellowship of the Ring. And when I was I've been planning to talk about these Lord of the Ring films since I started this podcast. It's always been there. And I wasn't, I've read the books at least once, maybe twice as a teenager. And I've seen the movies many times, but I'm not a true Tolkien head. I don't know a lot of stuff. I don't know all the lore. And so I wanted to make sure I had someone on the show who was that, and that is Tom. I'm in some like chats with him, and I could tell he really knew the subject really well. So we've been talking for a while about doing this. Another person who is sort of a notable Tolkien person online, a very sort of big person, was also going to join at one point, but then he kind of ghosted us. But whatever. So here we are. We'll do it live, as Bill O'Reilly said. So, give me a little bit of background on your relationship to material, and maybe your first experience seeing the this first film adaptation, or this first Peter Jackson film.
Yeah, so I first encountered Tolkien's work in a strange way, actually through school, not personally, and that was The Hobbit. And I read The Hobbit, and at the time I was very much into, as a young man should be, into guns and explosions and things that fly very fast. And so it was not very compelling to me the first time I read it. It was interesting, but I didn't have the appreciation for that realm of like fiction. I was far more interested in like World War II and the Vietnam War and like cool things like video games, which I grew up not playing and like not having access to. So it didn't stick at that point. But as is embarrassing to say for all the hardcore fans, is the movie Fellowship of the Ring is what opened that world up to me. And I was one of those like, liars, like, oh, I can't believe you haven't read the books. Well, I hadn't read the books when the movie was announced. And I very quickly got into the books. But it was the movie Fellowship of the Ring that kind of opened that door for me. And I had a bunch of nerd friends who had read the books and were very excited about the movie. And you always want to fit in with your tribe. And so I was excited about the movie. And going in tandem was kind of amazing, of seeing that movie as well as getting into the books. And it was just amazing. When that movie came out in theaters, I remember the poster of Frodo holding the ring. And it's like this, medium shot of Frodo and his shoulders, which is played by Elijah Wood. And he's like holding the ring, which is in the foreground. And it's, this ring right in the front, and not knowing the lore and being like, I have no idea what this is. And then going from that space, and then about 4 to 5 months going from what is this, what is the ring, to having read the Silmarillion, read the 3 books, reread Hobbit, gone through this, it was so much at just the right time that it left this indelible print in my life personally, just the things I was going through at that age and at that time, but also in my understanding of like what fiction is, what fantasy is, how stories should be told, how characters should be constructed. And this is a lot of stuff that I've thought of as I've gotten older and started to write. At the time, it was just everything I wanted in a story. And those movies coming out, going to see them as a young man, and being able to sit in the theater, and being able to sit in the theater with other people who were just as enamored and drawn in, is such an amazing experience, given that cinema is having this terrible slow death by 1,000 screens. Like, as we all watch things on tiny little screens, it's just, I know I'm going to sound like a boomer here, but it's just, I'm so glad I got to see it in theaters. I'm so glad I got to sit in that room with the sound blasting out and the huge screen, because that is where it should be seen. And the theatrical releases were great. The extended releases blow them away. It was this, people who didn't live through it, they don't understand that it was this like progression of events that culminated in the Academy Awards, like this huge win. And it was just crazy. It was an insane like run that those movies had, and getting to be a fan, through the whole thing from beginning to now, it was awesome.
Yeah, as part of this like 25th anniversary thing, they put them back in theaters. They did the extended version in theaters. I took my son to see Fellowship And he's too young to. Some kids his age read the books, but not really. He's pretty young, so he hasn't read the books or anything. But he had a great experience. I mean, he wasn't crazy about it, but it was just very special and fun. I mean, he liked it, but it wasn't like maybe he didn't have the same response I did back when I first encountered the stuff. But it was still very cool to go see it in person with him. Although I will say, on a technical note, the re-release was a bit of a scam because, at least at my screening, it was not like the technical specs or whatever, or how they were projecting it were not right. Like it was, I think, and someone told me online later, like that most locations were like, I don't know the industry terms for it, but they were like doing a sort of like a stream. They didn't have the actual like true highest definition in their like projection room. So
no, and that's happening.
Yeah, and I could kind of tell.
It's a lost art. It's so crazy how quickly it's degrading, because I remember growing up going to movies and watching movie technology get better and better through the 90s and the aughties, and then we have now already started to lose the projectionist as a skill set, as a trade. And projectionist is not just the projection equipment you use, it's the media, it's how the files are transferred. Like, I'm forgetting the name of the chain. It's not Alamo Cinema Draft House. It's them, but there was another one too. But they had a entirely custom version of Red Hat, which is a Linux operating system, or Linux derived. Might be Unix, but there was a Red Hat build specifically for, large cinema projection. And there was all these little pieces to the puzzle to get the movie from the editing bay and the final cut to that screen with every cylinder firing properly. And I don't really go to movies much anymore because there's no movies to go to. But there are old movies that look great projected. And I've just found that if you want any hope of seeing movies the way they're intended to be seen, you have to go to small, independent, or just cinemas where people actually care, where they care about more than butts and seats, where they actually care about the art form of projection. So that doesn't shock me. It saddens me, but it doesn't shock me that they've already started to fail on that front. And they just had had YouTube. I wouldn't be surprised if you saw or if it was clearly ripped from a torrent site and they just threw it up there with the Chinese, the Chinese subtitles on the bottom. That wouldn't shock me anymore, which is still
serious moviegoers, people who have those monthly passes and stuff, they all kind of have to learn in their local market which places are legit and which places are not. And some of the big chains are quite good. It's just location dependent. What technology they have at that location and do they have the right staff that actually does it right and all that. So yeah, it is this hit or miss thing. I don't like to, I don't like to discourage anyone from going out and doing that stuff, but you do kind of you can have bad, you can, the odds can be pretty bad basically that you'll have a proper experience.
Yeah, and it's a sad part if you don't have it in your area. And that's kind of why I've pulled away from films. I used to love films. I used to love watching any movie. There were periods of my life where I watched every movie if I had the time to watch it, good, bad, ugly, foreign, modern, classic, just ingesting movies. And I just don't feel that compulsion anymore. And this ties into the experience, what I kind of referenced of Lord of the Rings coming out. The method of release was unique. Not like Star Wars, by the way, very different. I know people always make that reference because it's a trilogy, but the component parts that led to the Lord of the Rings trilogy are so fundamentally different than what occurred with Star Wars.
And they came out 1 year after another, right? It was 2001, 2,
as a
and
scheduled
2003.
release. Yeah, that was the plan going in. Now there might have been, maybe they argued back and forth, but it was intended to be a year on a year on a year, and it was perfect. It's exactly what those films needed to gross the highest amount while also giving the maximum amount of fan service. Pretty amazing feat when you think about it, that they maximize the dollar count and the fan reviews, which is just, I kind of think that's unheard of. But yeah.
I don't recall, did they film it all at one time?
Yeah, so the process of filming it was technically all at one time, but what's kind of amazing with Peter Jackson for this specific project, and we can get into how it's not the same for The Hobbit, Yes, it was scheduled to all be shot at once. Yes, he did shoot scenes for all three movies at once, but the man just kept rolling. Even after the first movie came out, they were still doing pickups and reshoots. And it was just this, from a film industry perspective, it was an absolute nightmare of continuity and cost. Just the way he did this, and it destroyed New Line Cinema. It created lifetime enemies for him. It ruined careers for certain people, even as it was making careers for other people. It was just this. There's a tendency in film to talk about things, in my experience, that they talk about things with a very serious way, as if they're curing cancer or fighting a war. And it's just not that. It's not that big of a deal. I know it's a lot of money on the line, but a lot of self-aggrandizement going on. But with the creation and the culmination of the first three movies, it really was this kind of massive struggle. And it was a struggle against certain things, but it also had strange allies, and there was like third parties that were benefiting or detriment on either side. Very similar to the story in Lord of the Rings, actually, in terms of how it worked. There's like one film to rule them all, but like inverted. So it's a good thing, I guess. But when you dig into the making of it, was an insane thing, and it will never happen again until we have a substantial cultural change in this country. It was so perfect at the time it happened and the way it happened.
I was listening to like a behind the scenes thing, and Peter Jackson's telling the story of, I think they were initially going to work with Miramax on distribution of the movie, and Miramax, I guess, only wanted to do it all in one movie.
Miramax had agreed to a 2-movie deal, but they didn't want it. They wanted one movie, but they brought him in for 2, and then they tried to us him back down to 1.
Yeah, and so I recall like the story that Jackson's telling. He says then he goes and meets with the New Line guys, and they do that thing where it's like, I don't know if you ever watch a cooking show, like a reality TV cooking show, where the guy eats the thing and he's like, that wasn't good. It was great. Like they shock the audience, So, but the executive there was like, hey, we can't do 2 movies. We need to do 3. Like, he's like, you need to do 3 movies. Anyway, so that's the story he tells in that. But tell me, you mentioned that this ruined New Line Cinema. Like, I mean, this was a big hit. Didn't they make all their money back and all that?
There's so much fraud and corruption in film as a matter of course that it's always, you'll hear crazy stories. And one crazy film myth, may be true, it may not be, but the line producer or the unit production manager of Forrest Gump had his career destroyed because it went $2 million over budget on what they'd projected. And now you think about Forrest Gump, it was an incredibly successful movie. It's so good that they still show it on TV all the time. And when it came out, it did really well. It didn't flag at all. It wasn't like a sleeper or a cult following that like snuck back into the culture later. It was a huge success. So how is it that someone could have their career sidelined? I remember his name, but I'm not going to say it, but I can't remember his surname, so I won't say it anyways. But apparently someone very high up, below the line, but in high level production, was destroyed because of how the movie got shot. So instincts are kind of no use when it comes to behind the camera, behind the scenes with film, because so much of it operates in a strange way. So just be wary when someone's like, oh, it made this much money. It's probably a lie. It probably made more. And they're lying to the IRS because they don't want to share. That does happen, like where they'll pretend something's a loss or they'll categorize it as a loss. And I don't claim to understand this stuff at all. I just hear about it. So even if a movie is wildly successful, it does not mean that everybody affiliated with the investment and pre-production and production side is getting what they want out of it, or more importantly, what they need to get out of it. And as I understand it, New Line took a huge bath. And one of the darker things about Jackson that I've heard, cannot confirm this, is that he's a bit litigious when it comes to royalty ownership and commentary about things. He does not like when people, he doesn't like when people say bad things about himself or his movies, which is totally understandable. So that's kind of dogged his career. It's kind of in the backgrounds because he's obviously beloved, and he should be. But he had some very bad blood with the New Zealand Film Commission. I believe he had some incredibly bad blood with New Line. But another aspect of this to keep in mind is that you could pick any film, like big studio name right now. It could die tomorrow and everybody literally be dragged out and shot from the company. And then in 4 months, that exact company, quote unquote, is back again because everything's commoditized. So the New Line cinema that still exists today, it's New Line because they bought the rights to call themselves that, but it's not the same company. And so that's my understanding. And this is very patchy. I admit I'm not claiming perfect knowledge here. I could be wildly off base. But from my understanding, it was not a good experience for them at the end of the day, by which I mean the people running the company at the time.
Yeah, accounting in the film industry is crazy. I mean, I've seen
creative.
I saw someone do an analysis one time about like tracking the public numbers of budgets and revenue for a studio, like a specific studio, and like they arrived at this conclusion, like, well, this studio, if all of this is true, should have been out of business 10 years ago. Like,
yes.
This can't be true. Like, it cannot possibly be true. Like, they're basically giving away money to make movies, like, which they're not doing. Like, they keep making movies, so obviously something's working. So, and if you read the headlines, like, oh, every movie lost money, but no.
Yeah, there's the tax side of that. There's the ownership side. It's just it's so gross to me. Especially if you hold movies in high regard as cultural artifacts, or even like weapons in culture war, or just beautiful art, like art that you care about. It's just so cutthroat, and it's just very of the cultures and tribes that are involved in making it.
Yeah, I'm curious if you can give a rundown of the So, roughly what year do the books come out?
Oh man, of course you're gonna embarrass me. There is the first edition, second edition jump. This is why first edition books are.
I googled it, so it's
go for it. Yeah.
So Fellowship of the Ring published 1954.
It is the 50s. Okay, because the second editions are the late 60s, right? What I remember with the book is that there's a big divide between. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, like, this comes out in 1954. I assume it was popular upon release, or at least by the 60s and 70s, it seemed like it was quite popular. And it was sort of, it's a foundational fantasy text. I mean, I don't know. Does anything predate this? Because this seems to, like, of course, there's fantasy before this, like some of these ideas of knights and dragons and all that. But this seems to be the template going forward for how people what people think of as a fantasy novel.
A quick preamble to that's an absolutely excellent topic that I wanted to talk about, but in my own discovery of the story, and I'm not so read up on like the publishing ins and outs of like the making of the books, like I read the books a lot, but he pulled very significantly from Norse mythology, from Gaelic mythology, Christian mythology. He was very liberal with where he took things, so long as they were kind of European. So you can always go back and find kind of proto-fantasy, but something we forget just because we're all postmodern monkeys, like experiencing life through screens, is that prior to World War II, like the world was agronomic, it was unelectrified, and it was highly localized. So even having a place where you want fantasy, like wide-scale fantasy as a commodity, that was a very new thing. Not that people weren't making fiction works. Obviously, there's been fiction works since the Quran was written. So like you can go far back and find fiction, but the world as we understand it, of this like a path to stardom, power, and wealth being, I'm going to make up a story that people like. That's kind of a new thing. Not as new as like a computer programmer, but it is kind of that.
Well, yeah, like the narrative structure here.
Yeah, go.
Like the narrative structure of these books is very much, what we think of as a story, like what we think of as,
yes.
Because if you do read old, and I'm not the right person to say this, but I've gone back and I will read old like mythology or something, and the story structures are not, it's not like it's not a story structure that most modern audiences would find very satisfying, but this does have like the beats and stuff, and the way that characters are introduced, and the way we learn, like the way the exposition is done. Like
Yeah.
this is, I don't know if the right term is modern, but it's like it's something that modern people recognize as a fantasy tale.
So I break it down into that we are postmoderns, and that the modern era is like, call it 1890 to about 1960. That's the modern era in my head. And I've totally made this up. Can't substantiate it whatsoever. It's just how I parse historical information. And one more caveat. I'm going off memory here. I did not read a bunch of stuff before this. I'm just talking about a thing I love. I might get so much stuff wrong, and that's fine. I'll take it on the chin.
So I did want to say up front, like, this is such a beloved piece of intellectual property. Maybe it's crass to refer to it that way, but this is a rare instance on this podcast where the audience is going to know, many people listening are going to know a lot more than me. Yeah. I usually read about a movie for an episode, and I do this prep, and the audience doesn't necessarily know that much. But so many people of my like cohort love these movies and have watched all the behind the scenes and have read books and stuff that I totally welcome all the comments and corrections. That's going to be part of that's going to be part of baking this cake. So I welcome it.
Okay. And yet on that note, I might get things wrong. I genuinely don't care, because I'm going to read the trilogy in the Silmarillion again this year, and I'm going to read it next year. And I'm going to watch the movies when the kids are ready. Like, I might get stuff wrong. I love the story so much. But thinking about Tolkien and what he did as a South African, and as a man that fought through World War I, and he was in signals. So he was not a frontline grunt in that sense, but he was absolutely just as much as Adolf Hitler was in the front, as we're discovering through the reopening of World War II and some of the podcasts that have come out. Which opened my mind, because I didn't know how close Hitler and a lot of other high-level politicians and personalities from the mid-20th century were to the war. Tolkien was very much part of that war, and it colors his perspective on things. And, people can say George R.R. Martin is more visceral and it's more realistic. But I think Tolkien made a very conscious decision to focus on the higher aspects, why we call it elevated fantasy, instead of like rubbing it in the mud, because the mud is taken as a given for him. And in that same vein, he was a very talented linguist and academic. Like, he was not just a guy. Some amazing fiction writers are like janitors in their day job, or they do other things. So you don't have to be an academic to make good fiction. In fact, it's probably bad for you. But in his case, he marries historiography and the dryness of a text, like a historical text, with this incredibly vibrant and visceral fantasy world in a way that does set the genre. In my opinion, Tolkien created the fantasy genre. It's not that there weren't fantasy things before, and it's not that great stuff hasn't come after, but he is the lens. Maybe lens isn't the right word. He's the mirror. And I say that in terms of like how a satellite uses mirrors to take pictures. Like, he is that mirror that is used to gather the light of like loose fiction and focus it into a narrative. And he just did it so well. He did it in a way that set up.
Yeah, that's how I've always understood it.
Yeah. And others would disagree, and that's fine. But I think especially my favorite part of the trilogy, the Silmarillion is my favorite book. It's one of my favorite books of all books ever written. But of his work, ironically, Christopher Tolkien's collection of his notes and all the stories he told around the campfire and all these things, because this was a lifelong process for Tolkien. It wasn't like he sat down and wrote the books and that was it. This was this huge relationship he had with the lore and creating it. I just love the Silmarillion so much because I like history and I like the story before the story and all those things. So that's the one I've just really fell in love with. And then obviously I enjoy the others too. But when you look at the appendices of Return of the King, which so many people blows my mind that they read and they love Tolkien and they watch the movies, but they've never cracked the appendix. Like, they've never looked at that part of the book. And it's so good. It's so dense and engaging, and it fills so many gaps of the history, and it's got timelines, linguistic breakdowns. It shows you the alphabets of like Quenya and some of the other tongues. It's amazing. to see how much work he put into it. And you see that. I mean, I don't think we'd have Warhammer, Magic the Gathering, and so many other like fun and engaging, deep lore, for lack of a better term, products without him doing that, because he opened that door. And to bring us back to where we were talking about, his books were not these runaway hits in the 50s. As I understand it, could be totally wrong. Wikipedia might fix this. He puts them out. They get some traction. They're interesting. They're weird, though, because you have people in living memory in the 1950s. You have people that remember when the telegraph showed up. You know, you have people who remember electrification in the same way that, like, I remember 3G becoming a thing we had access to as Americans. And why, if that's the world you came from, where the oral tradition, or I think it's both, but that idea of like, you go to an old person because they've memorized all the songs and they know all the stories, and then you sit and they like can step through them in their head and sing you every song they know because they've been singing them since they were pre-literate. You know, that when that was how you got tradition and myth, why would you buy some random British guy's book to like see a made up thing when there's just so much lore and myth already that's a part of your life? And that's changed. Obviously, myth is dead. Like, we've lost our local myths. They've been ripped away from us and replaced with this disgusting, like, pasted on fakeness that we all just kind of share through the internet. So he was part of that jump. And it could be said that he might have facilitated it a little bit just by being so popular. I'm not going to touch that topic now, but I do think that has a bearing on why the trilogy is so powerful still, because it gave us kind of this intellectual permission to make up our own myths. And he did it by pulling from real myth. You know, he weaved it together in a fascinating way, and it's very good, but it is still, you know, artificial
Technical
myth.
difficulties. Please stand by.
I'm good to go. Are you good to go?
Yeah, I'm good. And you want to start? Did you? Because I had a larger point, but I don't know if you want to stitch or if you want me to stop going down that route. But what I was going to talk about is that gap of time between release and then uptake, and then there is a second wave. Because just to get this out, just so you like, he became popular with the nerds, the programmers, the weirdos, and it was their love that created the bigger thing, because there was a lull in popularity and then the movies came out. So there's this like doldrums in the 90s. But go ahead.
Well, yeah, this is kind of what I'm interested in. So the first book comes out in 1954. And then when was the first like film adaptation or attempt? I know there's like the animated version in the 70s. What else was there?
Right. So you have Bakshi, which is the one I'm particularly fond of. I can't remember if it was Rankin Bass. I need to rediscover the cartoon ones because I have children and I want them to see it, but I need to go back through, because Ralph Bakshi, who absolutely incredible artist. I mean, no disparaging what he did, whether it's Wizards or the Lord of the Rings. He made these amazing cartoons, but he was very much a debauched atheistic Jew in the 70s, like with all that entails. So he just so many layers to the man and to his work. But I loathed the cartoons when I first saw them. I thought they were this warped and twisted, like ugly. They just felt ugly to me compared to, and remember, I didn't read them as children. So like I found the movies and the books at the same time. And then I found later that there was a cartoon. And of course, I'm not going to recant what I said. I found them ugly. I have come to love the visual, and he's so much more tied to the actual story. It's not like a re-envisioning to the level that Jackson did, but it was very much this niche, weird thing. And this ties into what I was saying about how the books come out. And I think it takes about 10 years for them to become popular in America. That's when I believe, and I could be wrong on that, but in the 60s is when America kind of discovers Lord of the Rings. And then the 70s, riding that wave, but it's very esoteric and edgy. It's underground. It's not mainstream. And Bakshi's work with the cartoons very much reflect that. And then, you know, it's having this outsized influence on creative types. It's similar to, oh, of course, I'm going to forget his name, the American Python of Monty Python's. It'll come back to me after we've done talking about it, but Gilliam, sorry. Terry Gilliam is widely considered an amazing director by directors and film people. He's never quite landed with the population of film-going people. His movies always do kind of poorly, but people who make movies and people who love movies seem to like his work. And I think that's where Tolkien kind of rested for a long time, is having a deep influence on people who were creating things of their own. And one of Jackson's greatest contributions is yanking it from that and creating a movie that was very widely acceptable. And I'm not saying the books weren't popular. Lots of people read the books. They were phenomenal. They were amazing fantasy books, but they were still trapped in the fantasy category. And I would put there.
I'm looking. I found this like Reddit list of adaptations, and
there's like 4, right? And not all of them came out.
Yeah, there's not that much. I mean, I guess that is partly just driven by Tolkien. I mean, Tolkien was he was a skeptic of film, right? He wasn't that interested in it.
Again, he was from a world where the telegraph was high tech, and it was just this next iteration. And when you think back to the film technology too, back then when everybody read and wrote letters, you had so much more power creating images in people's heads than you did projecting it on a screen.
Yeah.
I wonder what he'd think now, seeing with the incredible reach that we have for taking an idea and illustrating it,
yeah,
loving and punishing detail on a screen.
I don't know what Tolkien would think of Avatar 3, Fire and Ash.
I think if Tolkien were here today, he'd shoot every one of us and then himself. No, I'm being silly about that, but I'm so glad he didn't live to see what we've become, because I'm kind of tied up in history itself. And I do think things were better before screens proliferated through every aspect of our life. But I do wonder too how he'd think about those movies. It's an interesting thought experiment, just because, it was his world. He put in the time and the effort over his entire life to build this fantasy world. It's everything. On his gravestone, he and his wife, he has Beren on his and Luthien on his wife. And if you don't know that, and we're not going to talk about the abomination that Amazon has unleashed on the world, but more people will know those names because of this terrible, atrocious insult to God that they are doing. But Beren and Luthien are this amazingly poignant and exciting and heartfelt and ultimately tragic story that is just one of scores of stories that are all a part of the Silmarillion that feed into Lord of the Rings, which Beren and Luthien are a direct line of the half-elf or the union of elf and men through Middle-earth's history, which culminates in the marriage of Aragorn, and I'm completely blanking on Liv Tyler's silly name, the injected female character into Lord of the Rings.
Eowyn? Or?
Yeah, no, why am I'm thinking Beren and Luthien. It's Elrond's daughter. I'm such a misogynist that I can't even remember her name, but it's a really wonderful story of this union that occurs. I think it's approximately Arwen. Thank you. God, that's embarrassing. 6,000 or 7,000 years previous to the stories as we receive them. I think I got my numbers right. I could be off on that. But it's a long, long time. When you have people that are immortal, the elves, history starts to stretch out at these huge timelines. And then you have men brought into the equation. I mean, the race of men, and they are this tying, Arwen and Aragorn are this tying of a knot, literally and figuratively, like genetically and culturally, that was kind of created and undone long ago in the history of a place called Beleriand. And I could go on forever about this. Obviously, Tolkien made up all of this. He built all of it, and it's so self-supporting.
How it's always kind of looked to me, and I never got too deep, but I had friends who were reading the Silmarillion and all that. It to me, it's like, oh, he wrote it's like he went and wrote an Old Testament for these people. Like, it has like
Yes.
that, like he's like, oh, this is my story, but then here's like the sacred, not necessarily the sacred text, but like the history of these people that they would have known. And yeah, he was in it.
Well, he wasn't a spring chicken when he passed, and he wasn't a stranger to writing and publishing. There's a very good argument to be made that he never intended for the Silmarillion to be a book. And again, deeper fans might come in and say, like, actually, or like whatever. But as I understand it, what comprises the Silmarillion is the fallout, the exhaust of the fiction engine that he built and ran. They were personal notes. They were historical tie-ins and all these things he wrote down, took the time to create, to feed into this world he built with the trilogy and The Hobbit. Like, it wasn't necessarily like, oh, I'm going to put it all together in a nice, neat book, which is what Christopher Tolkien, his great contribution, was taking all of his dad's writings and the leavings after he passed away of his own process and putting it together in this book. That's my understanding. Maybe I'm wrong, and he always planned on doing the Silmarillion, or he might have been in the process of doing it when he passed. But I don't think so. I think Christopher took that effort. And that is a side story that is worth exploring, because one of the great problems for people like me who believe the things that I believe is like, kings are great, princes not so much. You know, you get a great king, you get a great leader, but then they always seem to struggle to create an heir that can pick up where they left off. And I think Christopher Tolkien made mistakes, but they were, in my opinion, they were mistakes because he didn't see post-modernity coming around the corner enough to understand how some of the commoditization of his father's work was going to be abused down the road. I think he did an incredible job of picking up where his father left off and carrying it forward and safeguarding it to get us to Jackson's retelling. I don't think you get the trilogy without Christopher Tolkien putting in a ton of work and effort to create something that Peter Jackson could work with.
It seems, 2001, Peter Jackson making this one is the first like real attempt at live action. I mean, maybe there were other attempts over the years, but it's the first one that succeeded. And maybe that was just an issue of getting the rights or whatever. But why did it take as long as it did to get it? Or maybe it wasn't that long, I guess, if it came out in the 50s, but I don't know.
No, I think it was a bit of Peter Tolkien and the Tolkien estate safeguarding it. Because you think about the time, think about film, 1970s, 1980s, 1990s. And this is just my personal opinion, but I think non-CGI, CGA film, practical film for all intents and purposes, culminated in the 90s with a movie like Titanic. Which is I'm not a huge fan of the movie, but it's got one of the most amazing practical sets, where they actually built the thing and filmed and did the thing for real. They did it live. If I were Christopher Tolkien, I wouldn't let any director touch it until I saw some really amazing large scale film projects that fit like the quality and depth and texture of my father's stories. And there were lots of adaptations of old stuff. I'm terrible in classics, but like Ben-Hur, Spartacus, like there's directors did go out there and capture big movies. I think it was Kubrick has one movie, which I haven't seen, but it's got mass warfare, and he put in the effort to get thousands upon thousands of horseback riders and foot soldiers in a location with the proper anamorphic lenses to like capture it all. Like those efforts had been done.
Well, then that makes it.
Yeah, go ahead.
That makes it really even more strange how it played out that Peter Jackson would be the one to do it, because,
yes.
If you look at what he had done before, I mean, the thing he did last before the Fellowship was The Frighteners. Like, yep. He'd done some horror movies. I mean, he did Heavenly Creatures. That's like kind of like a thriller crime thing.
That's his big breakout, though, into feature film, like in the studio system was the Heavenly Creatures one.
Yeah,
which I've never seen, but I read that.
Like how was he the guy? They got it done. Like, it wasn't, you mentioned Titanic. It wasn't James Cameron. It
Nope.
wasn't, I don't know who else was known for doing big epics at the time. Like, but,
Oh, what's his face? The two brothers.
well, like whoever
Tony
did,
and
you have like Braveheart not long after this, and you have guys like people doing stuff like that. Like,
well,
it
Braveheart
wasn't
was
any of those.
before, I think, mid '90s. But no, your point is 100%
Oh yeah,
sound.
yeah, you're right. Braveheart's in '95, I think.
Braveheart's
yeah.
older, but I'm trying to think of the Scott brothers. Like, yeah, why didn't Ridley Scott make Lord of the Rings? It's kind of mind-boggling, right? You look at this guy on paper. You look at this kind of pudgy, short New Zealander.
Doesn't wear
And
shoes.
then you look at
always wears shorts.
You look at his work. I mean, I saw Meet the Feebles, like as I was like, I think I saw it before Return of the King came out, but after Two Towers, and I'm so deep into the lore at this point, I'm like gaming out all the Tolkien tattoos I'm going to get when I, become an elf, because like they're going to send the owl in the mail and I'll become an elf. Like I'm just such a huge dork about this stuff. And then I watched Meet the Feebles, which have you ever seen that travesty?
I have seen it back when I was a
actually
kid.
love it, but it's awful. It's so bad. It's so disgusting. And you watch the movie and it's crass and it's crassly lit and crassly shot. It's not epic. It's not beautiful. And that's just one, and he's got other movies, but yeah, how does that happen? More important to me though, because like bad things happen in film all the time where the wrong person is picked. How do you pick the wrong guy and he ends up doing it perfectly? Like absolutely perfectly. I don't care what anyone says. I'll die on this hill. Like they could not have been better. In my opinion, the movies that came out, the extended are better. And I'm so glad they went to the effort to do that. But imagine if they had tried to put out a 4-hour movie for the first one. I think it would have tanked the whole thing. I think the critics would have been just too heavy-handed with complaining. And I think even at that time, while we still had a human attention span, I think that was too long. They cut it perfectly to make it a long movie, but trimmed down just enough so that when people got into it, they were like, hey, guess what? This movie you love, there's a whole hour or more. And it threw gasoline on the fire. So that's such a brilliant strategic move for them, And was it planned? Was it luck?
If you look at what he does after as well, it's like, there's some okay stuff, but first of all, he doesn't do that much after. I mean, he does 3 Hobbit movies. That's its whole other thing. We don't need to get into that right now, but, he does the 3 Hobbit movies, but other than those, I mean, he does The Lovely Bones, which is, kind of like a sad horror movie.
Right. And the critics love it because it's not Lord of the Rings. And he ends up doing this kind of indie feel of like, whatever.
Yeah. It is King Kong.
But he does
that's
King Kong, massive in
stylized,
scope.
Stylized,
but it didn't land.
Stylized big thing. Yeah, but nothing else he did was really, that important. And it's just kind of crazy. It's just such an unlikely figure to have taken this on. And really, when you watch those like behind the scene things, it really cannot be overstated how much of a logistical and managerial challenge these movies were. And then, but this guy of all people pulled it off.
And he pulled it off with such elegance in retrospect. You're absolutely right. At the time, he was like I have it on somewhat good authority that while this was happening, the talk in the town of the people that knew it was going on were like, this is going to bomb. It's going to destroy otherwise promising actors. It's going to chase the production team forever with litigation. Like they're going to like have to run and hide in North Korea to try to get away from the film lawyers that are going to come after them for how bad this thing is going to be, because it's just costing so much time and effort, and it's costing so much money, and it's going to suck. No one's going to sit through this long movie and then do it 3 times. No one's going to do this. That was kind of the talk going on. And look how incredibly wrong they were. Like just how willing people are, and it blows the doors off. And now trilogy is a thing you actually hunt for. as a production company for a window of time. After these movies came out, it just changed a lot of what the studio system went after and looked for. And it bred all these other, not spin-offs, but like, this is something I wanted to get into as well, is that Peter Jackson showed the film world how you do this right. He explained in exquisite detail the right way to adapt high fantasy. And they have never been able to do it since. I don't care what you pull, but like the Caspian, why am I'm blanking on everything? The Chronicles of Narnia.
Witch and Wardrobe. Yeah.
What a disappointment, because some of them look great, and I do think they cared about it, but they just could not do it. They couldn't use the method, and I stand by this, and many may disagree, but if you want to adapt high fantasy to the screen, all you have to do is spend about a year ingesting all the behind the scenes written and on the screen and do it. Do what they did. The roadmap is there. And it's not it's a simple thing. It's not an easy thing. But like when you look at, cooking Hobbit feet every day for 9 months, every single day there was like 1 to 3 Weta employees making Hobbit feet and elf ears. They woke up in the morning at like 4 a.m. and they started the kiln and they like baked the Hobbit feet and the ears and the other little prosthesis stuff. And you just had to have a constant supply of those. And you had people who understood horses and could very quickly take a person who was like physically fit and intelligent, but they don't really know how to ride horses. And you could run them through a quick boot camp so that they could sit a horse at least. And while they're wearing their costumes and the costuming, you had Weta just cranking out, hauberks and helmets and gauntlets and greaves. Hauberk, helmet, gauntlet, greave. Like they had someone who that was their job. At the same time,
it's a total it's like a militaristic operation. It's so many moving parts.
One of my favorite things, I love sound design. It's a totally foreign to me and I don't know a lot about it, but I love good sound. And I only discovered this after you talked to me about doing this. It was just, I kind of stumbled over it. But to get some of the audio samples where you see these large armies, like being large armies from a very, very wide angle, specifically when Saruman shows Grima Wormtongue the army he's going to unleash on Rohan, they tried to record that in the traditional way of like this like doubling thing where you get like 6 people to make noises and then audio wise you split the track and then compound it on itself. And it was just, Peter Jackson refused. He said, no, it doesn't sound good. And so they went and they set up microphones at not a cricket game. I think it was a rugby game or a soccer game. And so they had 10,000 voice actors so that they could make the sounds that 10,000 people would sound like. It's such a silly little thing.
So that's like the chatter that you hear is actually from like...
Yeah, it's the shouting. When Saruman comes out onto that balcony on Orthanc and Wormtongue says something, but my lord, there is no such army. And then he opens the door and you hear them chanting and that tear comes down Wormtongue because he still has a shred of a soul and he realizes that this is the army that's going to crush the land of his birth. Like it's this amazing scene, but imagine going to some lawyer or producer and saying, hey, there's this 3-second scene. And so we're going to go take all of our audio equipment and convince a sports field to let us record, but we have to coach them. So we're going to have the director on a megaphone with producers telling 10,000 people some orcish language and giving them stage direction. Like, this is real. This happened. Like they did this.
Is that like a New Zealand rugby match or something?
Yeah, and Jackson had kind of the run of the islands while he did this. And this, I think, goes into a little of answering our own question. It's like, why Peter Jackson? Well, it's because he had a country to play with. Like, because he had the relationships, not good, by the way, like suing each other or threatening to sue each other, but he had these deep ties to New Zealand, the country, which was the perfect place to film it. And, I cannot stress enough how infallible his method is.
Someone the other day I was listening to, I can't remember who it was. I want to give him credit, but I don't remember who it was. But they mentioned like, it's important to remember New Zealand at this time was like a second world country. And so the labor rates were like, you could actually do this.
Yes.
These Weta people were working for a lot less than their Hollywood counterparts would have been working.
Very much so. And with a higher skill and a more industrial output. And this is something you get into when you get into set design and making props and doing these things. People know what they're worth, quote unquote, because a lawyer can advocate for them that they are worth that and convince them to not take work. It destroys the mechanical side of it if you are going to make Hobbit feet every day for a year. If you're going to make Hobbit feet for 3 months, that's totally different. You eat that cost. But like you said, yeah, they weren't getting paid like their Hollywood counterparts, and thank God. Thank God
also,
they were willing
it's
to do
interesting
their job
too,
for reasonable pay.
Last time it was one of the last times in modern history where English speaking Anglo, like these are Anglos, right? Like these are Anglos who will work for second world rates or whatever. Like that's maybe the last time that happened. Like
So
after that,
I want to tie this in here because something that Jackson did that he forced on the producers and the top of the line talent, like the featured actors, is they had to read the books and they had to be able to discuss the books. Like it wasn't just like, oh, read this before you start, read the script before you start. You'd be blown away by how people don't read scripts. They just put it off or they don't need to. And on the production side, the thing is so chopped up. You're not like shooting it in sequence. You don't need to know the narrative through lines to do your job as a makeup artist or whatever. But he was apparently pretty fascistic about people understanding the books because he knew that they were going to chop the story apart. Like they were not going to be telling this from page 1 to page last. And they were going to do things like cut out Tom Bombadil. And something amazing because the whole production leadership had such a firm command of the narrative, they were able to splice things out from the book and find a home for it in the movie, wildly out of place from the narrative of the book, even with different characters saying lines, like a Hobbit song from a throwaway portion of Fellowship of the Ring ends up being this incredibly moving singing part where Pippin is singing to Denethor. And it's that little section that's just like this throwaway rhyme from the beginning. It's not even like a moving song in the story. It's just this kind of little ditty that Bilbo wrote that the other hobbits like. But because Jackson and all the creative team like were so deeply familiar, they knew to be like, oh, you know what we need? We need a song. Go back to the first book. We'll put it here. And they were able to move on the fly like that creatively. You don't get this, in my opinion, you do not get this respect for the source material. And this is why the show that shall not be named is terrible. It's a trash show, and people that like it are dumb and don't deserve to read Tolkien, in my opinion, personal opinion. Anyone that has anything positive to say about that show should not legally be allowed to own Tolkien books. Like, that's how strongly I feel about it. But you could be good. Like, it could be good. And they're spending $1 billion to make it. But like, all your money, all your monopoly money cannot buy you a person who is driven to pay the source material the respect it deserves. And Jackson did. He cared about carrying the story forward. And apparently some very big arguments were solved by him saying, well, what would Tolkien do? like WWJD bracelets. And that apparently moved the needle on a lot of things when they decided what to cut, what to keep, and where to move it. And that's why, but you just can't, I guess you cannot convince Amazon to do that. Even though if they did, I think they could blow away Lord of the Rings. Like, you could do it again, but I guess it's just that perfect meeting of mind and method that all came together to create the trilogy movies.
Yeah, I'm interested in the question of like why this worked when, by against all odds, or when it shouldn't have worked, or at least the probability of failure was quite high. And I think you've touched a lot on the craft aspect. Like, these people were really in it. They were really they were bought in, and I think the craft is an incredibly important part of this. We've got the sort of conditions on the ground. We've got like the New Zealand stuff. And then another thing is like the cast. I think the cast came together so well, and we take for granted that that was the case, but Elijah Wood was a pretty well known kid at the time, but a lot of these guys weren't that well known. Like I think this was like Orlando Bloom's I think I saw something that Orlando Bloom made like $150,000 for this.
Oh yeah, this wasn't his first movie. This was his first real movie.
Yeah.
And look, here's on casting. I want to say this is that the king that returns through time to restore the spirit of the Numenorians is a trilingual Argentinian descendant of Nazis who spent all of his time becoming the guy. Like,
is he
think
really?
about
I didn't know.
I am being very creative here. He's German descended from Argentina. They got there before. I don't know.
Yeah,
but I know that he speaks 3 languages fluently. He is an incredibly serious man when it comes to his acting. And that when you look at what he'd done before, nothing so big, but everything, like apparently he took a dedication, a level of dedication to his craft that gets matched with people like Anthony Hopkins or Jack Nicholson. Well, not saying they're like great actors. I don't care what people think about them, but these are actors who completely absorb the role and become the character. And there are lots of good actors out there, but there are only a few great actors. And I think that of course, Viggo Mortensen, in terms of making a character real, it's a different movie, but it's called History of Violence.
Yeah.
He is so good at becoming the guy. And then Eastern Promises.
Yeah.
And these are all movies I saw because, I loved Aragorn so much. He does such a good job that I challenge any white man to be like sitting and doing what they do normally. And Viggo Mortensen to come around a corner in literally probably any costume, but dressed up as Aragorn, and to toss them a sword. And he says, "Follow me. Like, we are needed." And you wouldn't just get up and go. Like, if you turn in your vicious, sensitive white male card, if you're not willing to follow Aragorn around that corner, come what may. And like, he absolutely nails the role. And when
he was added late, wasn't he?
I was just going to say, he was not only added late, he was going to reject it, but his teenage son was like, "You cannot not do this," because he had just found the books, as so many sensitive young men do. Like, even before the movies, that used to be how you found Lord of the Rings, is that like you pulled it off a shelf, or someone you respect or care about handed it to you. And like, that's how it kind of propagated itself through the fiction ecosystem that we all existed in. So he was not, but he read the books. When he took the role, he said, "Okay, I'm going to take this role. I'm going to do this." And it directly influenced him taking the role of Hidalgo, which is a movie I've never really seen. I just remember it came out recently after, but he fell in love with the horses on set.
That's one of those roles that he got just specifically because of this.
Exactly, because of his work with a horse. And there's an amazing scene where they use a horse in a way that's completely illegal and would never be approved. Now, because of the danger to the actor of having a horse kneel down next to a lead actor or even a stuntman, it's just incredibly dangerous because horses are flighty and they're unpredictable. And on the side of her, he nearly drowns. The guy is so committed that he nearly drowns in the scene where Aragorn almost drowns. You know what I mean? And it's like, it's not like he's, "Oh, I'm going to do this to be realistic." It was just, he was wearing too much, and their safety divers were not in proximity because of the rapids. And so he gets pulled under and caught in one of those, there's a term for it, but when the water smashes in on itself and kind of creates a loop, and they had to get him out of that.
Or something? Yeah.
It's not, no, there's another, I'm embarrassed because I really like.
Riptide, I don't know, whatever. Yeah.
No, it's what's created from what's called a weir gate, but it's neither here nor there. And he's not alone though. Like, then you have Sean Bean, who commits to a role so perfectly, like so well, knowing he's not going to get to have fun and play games with all the rest of the guys because he's going to be exiting early. He's got some pickup shoots later when they do Return of the King, but he still sends it. It's just such full send on the Boromir character. And the subtle differences of movie Boromir versus book Boromir are so fascinating to me. Neither is diminished by the other, but they are distinctly different. Because the book, you get so much more depth as to why he is the way he is. But they didn't have the scope, They didn't have the time to build that character up the way the book does. And so they had to find a way to get the Aragorn, to get the Boromir of sacrifice to make sense with the Boromir of status and pride. And it goes that direction. And there's so many other aspects. I could literally just gush about every single one of these actors. The takeaway here is the casting is perfect. So just to keep track, we've got the perfect director, who is the worst director you could probably imagine on paper. We've got the perfect location. We've got the perfect crew. We have the perfect environment for practical effects enhanced by digital. Because remember, right after these movies come out, it flips over because these are shot on film, but the Red camera is just around the corner. The Panavision had their own digital that was coming through. It wasn't as good. The Red, if you don't know this, the Red camera is the camera that made the transition from film to digital. It's not perfect, and there's been a couple iterations of it, but it was the Red, the original Red 1, I think, or Red 2 or 3. I don't remember. They changed the name, but then it was the Red Dragon, the small form factor one that was the big jump. And then you had other digitals too, but this is the time when the pros stop using film, 35 millimeter film, and they start using the digital version of film. That happens just after this. And in fact, Lord of the Rings was a big reason because they were like, wow, it was really hard with film. It'd be a lot easier digital. It's not, by the way. It's just as challenging, but neither here nor there. But if that had happened sooner, this movie would not have happened the same way. Like, you have so many things coming together at the perfect window of time to make this thing what it has become.
Yeah. I think as well, I bring this up all the time. Another big component for why this worked is the score. And I think scoring a movie is one of those, it's one of the most uncertain things. Like, you can bring in a famous guy who has a good track record, but you don't know if they will quite, because they have to make something original, and music is a little bit, there's more of a magical element to music that is just hard to predict, but it's astounding how good the music is in this. And I sometimes think of it, I mean, there's maybe some examples that prove me wrong, but I think it's basically the last time a movie, like an epic movie, had original music that was really, really good and like worked and was memorable. I don't really know. There's some small other examples since then, but it's the last time that there was this much good score in a big epic like this.
So I've never done it, but I've always dreamed, and it only happens in certain places, but apparently you can go to a stadium or stadium size theater hall and a full orchestra plays the score live while you watch the movie. Now, I don't know if this was a one-off. I don't know if it was a tour. Personally, if we didn't have the cabal of the soulless running everything in our culture right now, this would be a holiday thing where once a year in the Anglo world, it's like the trilogy day. And like, honestly, I feel like you could make money doing it. But of course we can't have beautiful and nice things, but just the idea of that really lends credence to what you're saying, in that it's not just a score. It's not just like something put together to sound big and orchestral. It's so good that it makes sense to do it that way because it challenges the musicians and people really enjoy it. And it's evocative and it's this totalizing experience.
I know people who've gone to those performances. It sounds really cool.
Yeah, my jealousy is eternal, and I hope to do it. I was really kind of frustrated that I didn't get through the books fast enough to go take the kids to the movies. But after hearing your story, I'm like, nope, totally fine with that, because I'm just gonna, if I ever hit it big, I'm gonna rent out a theater, and everybody's gonna be invited to come do the extended trilogy. Maybe we'll even get an orchestra to do it. But I feel like these movies have that social cachet that you could do that. Like, you could sell tickets to that and you'd sell out. Like, people would go to see it still. Even if they've seen the movies a million times, they'd want to bring their kids. They'd want that experience of the live music. And it all came together just so perfectly. And I don't know a lot about the music side of it. What you say sounds correct to me. Like, it feels correct. I'm sure that, like, people that care very much about scores might be able to mention this or that or the other one, but it really kind of set that standard. And I just, like, when you think about the Hobbit, or the Shire soundtrack, that's the one everyone's very familiar with. I think the sleeper for me is Rohan. That music throughout the entire Rohan segment, Rohan, I say it different every time, that is just so good. It's so incredibly perfect for the movie, but it's completely portable to any situation where it's time to like mount up and kill things to protect things you love. Rohan music is perfect. And
well, yeah, that's that's kind of what I mean. It's like lots of movies can grab one or two ideas, musical ideas that will be signature to that movie and are compelling and like and memorable. But these movies had like 9 or 10 signature like musical phrases and runs that like everyone immediately associates with the movies and knows where it came from, and finds them pleasing. Like that's really crazy.
I would take this further though, and we could test this. It would be a really amazing study that you could do where not only do people do that association, you could play it blind to people who have never seen the movie. And I bet all 10 of them, you could get them to use like a word bank and like a sentiment range and say, in this music of these 5 words, which word most characterizes what's happening in the scene of this movie you've never seen? And like everybody with a pulse and an IQ over 100 would nail it. Like they'd nail the scene just hearing the music. Maybe not. Maybe that's an insane thing to say, but I really feel like it hits the tone in a very general way, as well as being specifically perfect to the scene that's actually happening while you're watching it. I think if the sentiment carries through just when you're listening to it. Obviously, you have to have appreciation for music and the depth of classical music to some degree, but it's just also so accessible. You know what I mean? Are you aware of a band called Dream Theater?
Yeah.
I was in the background of live music. I was never like in a band and like up front, whatever, but I spent a lot of time with musicians, and I found that guitarists, really good guitarists, all really respected and loved Dream Theater. And I would sit through it, listen to it with them, and I can appreciate it. But like, I was very much just nodding my head and smiling because I wanted to be with the cool guitarist guys. I don't get it. I don't get what's great about an 18-minute song with like 7 competing dueling guitar solos, whatever. So it's high quality. It's amazing. I don't mean to disparage Dream Theater as musicians, except for their singer. That's an inside joke. I'm just being silly. He's a great singer. But it's not accessible. That you cannot say the same for the score. It's absolutely technical, but it's so accessible to anybody. You can just listen to it and enjoy it and get what you need from it.
Yeah, and it's deeply rooted in like a classical folk sound of like the British Isles. So it's
right.
It's just, it fits perfectly.
There's one thing I'd like to, and I don't know, you can set the tempo here if we've got everything you want. I want to talk about the narrative itself in the story, because that's the one thing we've kind of left out here. Do you have time or desire to do that? Do you want to put a pin in it and do it later? What are you thinking?
Yeah, so I think we should definitely do a part 2. We could probably do that as soon as like next week or something. If that works for you.
No, I'll make it work. You don't understand that, like, if I could put a gun through the computer, I would point it at you and say, we're going to keep talking about this until I'm good and done. And we'd be here another like 4 hours. I just really, really enjoy it. And I told my wife this. This is the first time I've ever gotten to do this on this topic, not in text form, because I've definitely spent some time on certain websites talking about how much I love this. But the last time I had a conversation this deep on this topic was back in high school when the movies came out. You know what I mean? So this is amazing, and I can keep doing it. But on the technical side, one thing I do want to touch on, and you can please cut this out or keep it, I don't care. I want to talk about the critics, not to the movies, but to, in current era, there are certain people who part of their little clickbait empire is to attack the movies and attack the books. And they have these like little cute little reasons. They have this little pride parade of reasons for why it's not good, or it's not as good as people remember, or there's something better, blah, blah, blah. And I'd like to touch on that. And I'll try to be as objective as I can and not use bad language. But they have no leg to stand on, because all these things that we've talked about, all these elements of the production, the process of getting to pre-production, all this stuff would not have happened if there was not an incredibly moving and enjoyable narrative, because that's what it hangs on. You don't get to become a cult classic with a bad story. You don't get to become the harbinger of an entire genre, like by being like poorly written and not well thought out. Like, that's not how that happens. Maybe nowadays we've gotten so soft and flat, but when you look at the 50s, 60s, and 70s, like, it was just not a simple thing to become so widely loved and respected. And it's there in the movies too. It's not just the books. And that's part, to me, is almost more magical than all the other stuff we said, is that Jackson managed to literally dissect, vivisect, bisect, cut the thing up and put it back together. And Frankenstein's monster is differently beautiful. Like, yes, he cut it apart. Yes, it's different. Yes, and there are complaints you can make. The Tom Bombadil complaint. You can always find something. Well, why didn't he do this? Blah, blah, blah. It's perfect. He made the perfect adaptation that pays absolutely every bit of tribute to the story that it needs to, while being distinctly its own fiction entity. And I'd love to be able to talk about that too, in terms of the story and why the books are so good and how that feeds into the movies as well. So I'd love a part 2, because I could do this forever.
Yeah, no, we'll definitely have to do part 2, because, I mean, we've barely gotten into it. I mean, there's a ton more to do. So and plus we had like some technical difficulties. So that kind of,
well, granted, here's the
up.
problem though, is if you do a part 2, we're going to have to do a part 3.
Well, oh yeah. I see what you mean.
I'm being foolish. No, it's honestly totally up to you, and I can do it more. And I can, once you stop recording, I can give you some names of people who try to keep it on the DL, how deeply they are into the lore. So.
Okay, cool. All right. So people listening at home or wherever you are, this is part 1. We're gonna do part 2. We gotta come back. There's still, obviously, we barely even talked about the actual narrative of the movie and the scenes and all that. So, all right. Thank you for joining. But we'll be back, maybe hopefully within a week.
Awesome. It was a pleasure.
Thanks.